welcome to this week's episode of Hashtag Leadership What's on Your Mind, a podcast to make you stop and think about your leadership journey by bringing experts in their field and great people with great stories to change your perspective and add to your story. So today we're speaking to Garth. How are you doing, Garth? You okay?
I'm doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
That's fine. So Garth, I met Garth about 2 years ago at a networking event, and he's got an infectious personality, and I knew that he would be great to come onto the podcast and share his thoughts about leadership. So we've managed to get him on. So Garth, as I start the timer, for people who don't know you, just give us a little bit about who you are, what you do, and introduce yourself.
Oh, great. Thank you very much. Any opportunity to join your audience and your network, Stuart, is something that I would certainly jump onto. And thank you very much for the invitation. Yes, we met about 2 years ago, and I've always been following the work that you do. I'm Garth Dallas. In fact, normally when I introduce myself, I go and give the full introduction. My name is Garth Orlando Dallas. So therefore, my initials are, there you go. People normally say, oh my God. But I take no credit for that. My parents obviously had a fantastic sense of humor when they decided to name me in the way that they did. But guess what? I've utilized that as I get older in the best way that I can. It's a very good icebreaker. I have no illusions of grandeur, but it is my name and I make use of it. I like to consider myself as an individual, an ordinary person who has always considered himself to be more than ordinary. And what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is I believe that within every single individual, there is that sense that you can go beyond boundaries that are set for you or boundaries that you set for yourself. I was born in Jamaica. And it's a beautiful, small island. We all know about Jamaica and Bob Marley and reggae and all the other stuff that goes with that. It's sun, sea, and all of that type of stuff. But, growing up, I was fortunate because, I'm from a family where education was at the center of everything that we did. Because, my parents who themselves weren't blessed with education to any high level, they felt, and this is part of the whole African legacy, that education is the key, education is the way out. So they invested and they sacrificed a lot to ensure that all their children had a reasonable education. I'm the last of 7, and all of us benefited from decent education. And just to go back to what I said before, education then opened my eyes, and I just sensed that there was a much wider world out there. The boundaries of Jamaica would not hold me. I'm a proud Jamaican, but I always knew and always felt that there was a bigger, wider world beyond that. And, as a young man, we did all the usual stuff in growing up, and we enjoyed life, and we did all of that stuff. But I left Jamaica having completed my what was called O-levels and A-levels. Back then I went to a school called Kingston College, which is still considered the top all-boys school in Jamaica, and no disrespect to all the other high schools in Jamaica. But Kingston College has a motto: Fortis cadere sedere non potest. It means, that's Latin for, the brave may fall but never yield. Fire burns wood, but tempers steel. That has been ingrained in my DNA from I was 11, 12, right through to when I left high school at 17, 18, having completed my A-levels. And that has carried me right throughout my career, my path in the world. I left to complete a degree in Hungary, believe it or not. There were these exchange scholarships between Jamaica and what was then called, the Eastern Bloc countries. There were exchange scholarships to the likes of Russia and what was then Czechoslovakia, now the Czech Republic, and Hungary. And I took up one of those scholarships. I was a little bit of there was a bit of bravery there, but I took one of those scholarships to study chemical engineering. And that literally changed my world. The whole idea was that I would return to Jamaica to work in the bauxite industry, which back then was one of the main world industries in Jamaica, because the bauxite in Jamaica was easily mined on the surface. So there was not much process to go in to get the bauxite out, and alumina and all of that stuff was a major export. But when I went to Hungary back then, 1987, and it was still behind the Iron Curtain. Kadar János was the president of Hungary back then. Honecker was still in East Germany. Gorbachev was still in Russia in his perestroika and glasnost. What I'm talking about is I landed in Hungary at a time when the world politics around that time was very, very intensive. And there is a young Jamaican, a black man landing in a place like Hungary, Eastern Europe, where there was so much change going on, and there was, history will show that when you have rapid changes like that, countries normally look inward, and there is this whole idea of xenophobia and all the stuff that goes with that. So I grew up very, very quickly. I knew I was there to represent Jamaica. I was there to study chemical engineering. I was there with a mandate based on my scholarship, a stipend which was being paid by the Jamaican government, to bottle down, get my knowledge degree, and then go back to Jamaica. But that was not what happened, because it was inevitable that the world around you would shape you. It was inevitable. When I stepped out on the street, there was no consideration as to whether or not I had a sense of belonging in that environment or not. So I had to literally grow up very, very quickly within a society, within an environment where being different could be the difference between life and death. And at that point, I became pretty much an advocate for humanity. And certain things happened which was well beyond just studying chemical engineering, that I then had to make decisions which determined how I dress, how I travel, what position I take when I go on public transportation, whether or not I am with my back to the door or not. Simple things like that, because there were elements that were there to sometimes hurt you, and you had to make decisions about growing up very, very quickly, far, far away from home, and that has shaped Garth Dallas to this day, because I learned very, very quickly that we are all humans. We all have the capacity to love. We all have the capacity to hate. But at the end of the day, we're all in this together. We're all interconnected. When I left Hungary, the war in what was Yugoslavia was just about happening. it affected every single facet of what was going on in the way that we studied. The whole idea around even, Ceausescu in Romania, the whole insurgent was started by ethnic Hungarians, and those same individuals were either professors working in the university or colleagues that I was sharing work with in university. It affected everything. I came away from that environment a more rounded individual. I had my chemical engineering degree, but I was a changed person. And I vowed that from thenceforth, whatever I do is about promoting the beauty of diversity and the beauty of diversity and inclusion, and the fact that as human beings, we can make choices about how we engage with each other and make sure that once you have that awakening, you stand up as a beacon of hope. That's a very long introduction, but that is Garth Dallas.
You know what? I love that, because it's great to hear where you've come from and the story behind it. Let's go to leadership. So when you, obviously the podcast hashtag leadership, what's on your mind? What comes to your mind when you hear the word leadership?
That's a very good question. And for me, there are various things that come to my mind when I talk about leadership. I did an MBA. First thing I did when I came from Hungary, I did an MBA at University of Liverpool. There's a story behind that, but we haven't got enough time to go into that. But within that MBA, one of the considerations back then was, are leaders born or made? And there's this discourse, there's this whole, and tons and tons of research time has been spent on that. For me, leadership is dynamic. And I think there is a leader in all of us. And what do I mean by that? You can be, there are certain skills that can be taught as to, based on observation of what people consider to be successful individuals who had leadership roles. But I certainly believe that every single individual in an organizational context have the capacity to lead or to show leadership skills in whatever they are doing. Leadership doesn't necessarily have to be at the top of an organization, but the Garth Dallas today sees himself as what would be called a servant leader. And what does that mean? It is a concept where you believe that you're here to serve. And notwithstanding the fact that you may be at the top of an organization, you're providing service. And what flows from that is a consideration of making sure that you're not just there to promote the advancing of the organization, whether it be their image or whether it be their bottom line, which is profit. It's an understanding that all together within an organizational concept or organizational environment, we can all serve and show leadership in whatever role we're doing in that organization. Therefore, together, there is no insubordination, there is no subordination, there's no stuff where, I'm gonna get individuals within my team to do something because I happen to be at a higher level within the organization than them. In other words, if it needs mopping up, if it needs cleaning up, if it needs scouring, and therefore I am the one to do it, I will do it. It doesn't mean that there is any task that is below me. Having said that, with leadership comes responsibility and accountability, and therefore there are times when a decision have to be made, and the decision-making process sometimes doesn't require for there to be a committee, because you may not necessarily have the capacity or the time to do a long-winded decision-making process. So leadership is about serving. Leadership is about having the skills to be able to make decisions and make decisions decisively, knowing, and that gets better as you go along, as you age, as you mature, as you have more experience. You make decisions quicker based on previous experience, previous mistakes.
Yeah,
leaders should also be prepared to admit when they get it wrong.
Yeah, and how often do we hear that even talked about? And that's a whole subject in itself, about being vulnerable as a leader. And I think we've seen quite a lot of leaders in the last 12 months in the global pandemic learn that quality of being vulnerable. I've talked to lots of people about, in this current situation, we should communicate, and communicate. Just be outward with our leadership as more than ever. So going back to you a little bit more here. So talk about whether you're aware of it, whether you were aware of it at the time, or whether you're thinking on reflection. Where did your leadership journey start, and how has that developed over the time, the ups and downs of your leadership journey?
My leadership journey can be traced back even to, as a young person, even at high school level, where, because I'm from a large family, which I said in my introduction, and being the youngest in such a large family. And if you understand African Caribbean culture, right, there is some hierarchy there. So I had the opportunity to learn from my older siblings, and to then take some of the skills there and adopt those skills within various environments, whether it be, the sporting environment, or being part of the debate team at high school, or be part of the magazine committee, and all of these various things. You take on various roles, and Kingston College was set up, or hopefully still continues to be, that institution where it's not just about academia, it is providing life skills for individuals to go in the real world. And those included leadership skills. So in making that decision to go to Hungary to advance my career, to not stay within the confines of Jamaica, to believe that at some point I wanted to be able to go back to Jamaica to provide or to contribute to the development of Jamaica. By the way, I should say that even though I hadn't gone back to Jamaica, decisions were made for various other reasons, but I continue to play various roles in advancing Jamaica via diaspora development, and being, for example, the chair of the Liverpool Commonwealth Association, and we do a lot of work around, diaspora development, but that's for another day. So my skills started there from even a younger age. But as I started my career, having completed my academia studies, I sense, even when I started my first bit of work in my own consulting role, having completed my MBA, I did some work in regeneration within the Liverpool 8 community. Back then, it was Objective 1 status, and there was a lot of work being done with the housing associations. Riverside Housing, for example, will be named here, was doing a big work in trying to regenerate a part of Liverpool, eh? And the work that I did there was in relation to the fact that it wasn't just about the built environment. You can regenerate a community, you can build new properties, but the work that I did was about ensuring that the individuals within the communities also participated in that regeneration process. So what we did, I was involved with ensuring, for example, that there was a local labor in construction project linked to the build construction process. What that meant was that the individuals from the local community or the main contractors had to write within their contracts that they would employ local people. That took leadership to engage with the negotiation around that, to understand the local needs. And from there on, I have got better at it, I've blossomed at it, and I'd like to think that it is a journey, not a destination. And I have never shied away from, taking on leadership roles, sometimes based on the fact that there's a vacuum, but I'm always prepared to put my head above the parapet and practice what I preach and take the risk, knowing that failure is part of the process of success.
Amazing. I don't know whether you heard that was the 20-minute timer. Thank you so much. Just give me, obviously our audience is wanting to level up on their leadership journey through awareness, through learning. You mentioned that's so true about that lifelong learning, and it's a journey, not a destination. There's no full stop, is there, in your leadership journey? What one thing would you tell people to do to sort of level up their leadership?
Yeah, well, one thing is never stop learning. Always equip yourself. And there's so much learning out there. There's so much free learning out there. You use a C word before, and I'll use another C word. Collaborate, collaborate, collaborate. It is the way forward. We are in a situation where we have to collaborate with each other and collaborate on the learning process. 80% of the negotiation that we do is based on 80% of the success of our negotiation is based on how prepared we are. The more prepared you are going into a negotiation process, the more likely you will succeed. And part of your preparation is understanding, knowing the play field, knowing who you're going up against, who are you going to be speaking to, learn about that person, just collaborate, LinkedIn, all the social media platforms, just get to know people better, because at the end of the day, what this current situation has taught us is that people are at the center of any organization journey. If you look after your people, they will look after your customers. If you look after your customers, they will also affect your bottom line. So that's why my whole work in the Good Business Festival is about changing the concept that it's all about shareholder value. It's about learning. Leadership is about making sure that you are collaborating, learning from others.
Amazing. Thank you so much today for your time, Garth. Guys, if you want to check out Garth, I'm going to put the links in the comments below. If you're watching us on your YouTube, on the YouTube channel, make sure you hit subscribe, hit the bell. A new episode comes out every Wednesday at 6 a.m. and my vlogs are going great. They go out at 6 a.m. on Mondays. If you're listening to us on your podcast provider, make sure you hit a follow, and it helps us and it helps you if you can add and comment about your takeaways from this episode and previous episodes. So Garth, thank you so much again.
You're welcome. Thank you for having me. And before we go, my social media handles at Twitter is Garth Dallas. Very, very simple. And for my company, Dallas Consulting, it is at Dallas Consulting. And it's pretty much the same right across Twitter, Facebook, or Instagram, or LinkedIn. It is pretty much simple. Garth Dallas or Dallas Consulting.
All those amazing channels we have now. Excellent. Right, guys, thanks very much for listening and watching. See you next week.
Thank you very much.